Through the UFC, many fans follow the careers of athletes and become emotionally invested in their lives. Unfortunately, some are taken away from us before their time. Today, we are paying tribute to the fighters of the UFC that have passed away before their time. The first person on the list is Kevin Ferguson, better known as Kimbo Slice. He rose to fame from his online street fighting videos where he completely dominated everyone that was put in front of him. During his rise to fame, Dana White initially criticized him for not being a real fighter and not having a chance in the octagon. White then invited Kimbo to participate in the Ultimate Fighter TV show, where they dedicated that season to heavyweights just for him. In the first bout, he went up against Roy Nelson. He was taken down in the second round and put into a crucifix, losing via TKO. His next bout was against Houston Alexander, who spent the majority of the fight circling Kimbo and not engaging. Kimbo was able to score more points in the second round, taking the win via unanimous decision. His last fight with the UFC was at UFC 113 against Matt Mitrione. The fight starts with Kimbo getting two back-to-back massive takedowns. Matt gets a hold of a triangle chokehold, but loses it. The two begin trading blow for blow before Matt is able to trip Kimbo. He attempts another choke but is unable to get the submission before the round ends. In round 2, we see Kimbo's legs start to give out after accumulating all those leg kicks. He was eventually taken to the ground and lost via TKO. On June 5, 2016, Kimbo was admitted to the hospital and passed away the following day due to heart failure. Despite not having the best professional MMA record, Kimbo Slice is a legend in his own right. From homelessness to becoming one of the world's most recognized and beloved fighters with a legacy that will last forever. Next up on the list is Ryan Jimmo. His UFC debut was against Anthony Parash at UFC 149. He got a knockout win in the first 7 seconds, receiving knockout of the night. His next bout was against James Tahuna in February of 2013. Jimmo lands a nice left kick that drops Tahuna. Jimmo aggressively looks for the finish, but Tahuna manages to survive until the end of the round. For rounds 2 and 3, Tahuna manages to get takedowns on Jimmo and ground and pounds him, taking the win via unanimous decision. At UFC 161, Jimmo went up against Igor Pekraeus. Through all 3 rounds, Jimmo seemed to be more aggressive and in control of the octagon, giving him the win via unanimous decision. 3 months later, he had his next fight against Jimmy Manuwa. The fight started with a lot of fighting from the clinch position. However, the fight was abruptly stopped in the second round after Jimmo suffered a leg injury, giving the win to Manuwa via TKO. He next faced Sean O'Connell, where he was able to drop him with a right hand finish him off, taking the win via knockout. Unfortunately, Jimmo lost his next 2 bouts against Ovince St. Preux and Francimar Barroso, and was released from the organization. During the early morning of June 26, 2016, Jimmo had an altercation with a truck driver, and as he was walking away, the truck ran him over and left the scene. Sadly, Ryan Jimmo was pronounced dead later at the hospital as a result of his injuries. The driver was Anthony Getschel, who was 23 at the time. He was charged with second-degree murder and sentenced to 8 years in jail. We also have a video dedicated to UFC fighters who are currently serving life sentences for their crimes. Click the link on the screen now, or you can find a link in the description. The third person on the list is Evan Tanner. He has had a large impact on the UFC, with many considering him a pioneer of MMA. Tanner is a former UFC middleweight champion and probably the only person that has held a belt after learning martial arts from instructional videotapes. His notable wins include Robbie Lawler as a middleweight title eliminator bout. The fight starts with Lawler getting a huge takedown. Tanner attempts an armbar but is unable to get it. He then gets in a triangle choke and gets the submission win. His next bout was against David Terrell for the vacant middleweight title belt. In round 1, Terrell grabs a hold of a guillotine choke, but Tanner is able to break free. Tanner then unleashes heavy shots onto Terrell and takes the win via TKO. His professional MMA record totaled 32 wins, 8 losses, with 29 of his wins being via a finish and only 3 wins via a decision. On September 3, 2008, Tanner went on a camping trip into the desert with some friends. Some reports state that Tanner contacted friends to let them know his dirt bike ran out of fuel and he was walking back to the campsite. However, Tanner never made it back to the campsite due to the high temperatures and lack of water he had with him. Authorities found his body 3 days later, with the official cause of death being heat exposure. Another fighter's death that shocked the MMA community was Gilbert Aldana. He was known for his aggressive fighting style and knockout potential. Before joining the UFC, he had 5 straight wins, with all of them by means of knockouts, with a total of just 3 minutes and 53 seconds. He made his UFC debut against Paul Buenatello at UFC 57. The fight starts with no hesitation, with the two entering a dogfight. Buenatello connects and drops Aldana, but Aldana recovers quickly and the two continue to throw bombs at each other. The two take a small breather before Aldana lands a nice right hand that drops Buenatello. He attempts to get back, but Buenatello manages to get back up. On the feet, Buenatello comes back with haymakers that breaks Aldana's nose. In round 2, Buenatello starts to really dominate the fight and takes the win via TKO. His next bout with the UFC organization was against Czech Congo. In the first round, Congo hurt Aldana and forced him into survival mode. The fight was later stopped due to the cut on Aldana's face, giving Congo the win via doctor stoppage. On the 11th of March 2007, Aldana, fellow MMA friend Dave Conant, and their families went on a boating trip in Lake Pleasant. At one point, Aldana's t-shirt flew into the water and Aldana jumped into the water to retrieve it. Due to the heavy winds, there was large waves in the lake and Aldana was seen having trouble treading the water. Conant jumped to help him, but struggled to keep them both afloat due to the harsh weather conditions. Both families on the boat tried moving the boat as close as possible and throwing a life jacket out to them, but the wind made this near impossible. Conant eventually made it back on the boat, but Aldana never did. His last words were, "I'm okay." And this incident unfolded in front of his wife and 2 young sons. When news broke out, Dana White gave the family his condolences and stated that Aldana was a real fighter. His coaches also commented that he was a devoted family man. Next up is Kevin Randleman, a well-known figure in MMA and wrestling community, competing in organizations such as Pride, Bellator, UFC, and Strikeforce. He is a former UFC heavyweight champion and 2-time NCAA Division I wrestling champion. Randleman was widely known for his acts of giving back to the community. In 2008, he went to Iraq with other UFC athletes to support the troops. He was more than happy to pose for pictures or sign autographs to anyone who asks. After his fighting career, he set up a non-for-profit program called Monster Wrestling Academy and taught wrestling to high school kids. On February 11, 2016, Randleman passed away due to complications from pneumonia at the age of 44. The UFC later announced that Randleman would be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame in the Pioneer Wing, becoming the first person to be posthumously inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. The next person on the list is Justin Eilers, who was murdered by his stepfather. He is the former IFC US Heavyweight Champion and IFC Battleground Heavyweight Champion. Eilers made his UFC debut against Mike Kyle. The fight does not leave the first round, with Eilers landing a nice left hand that knocks Kyle out cold, giving him a knockout win for his debut. His next bout was at UFC 51 against Paul Buenatello. The fight starts with Buenatello throwing a barrage of punches with Eilers, seemingly able to withstand them. He then throws a second flurry of strikes and knocks Eilers out in the process, giving him the win via TKO. 4 months later, at UFC 53, Eilers went up against Andrei Arlovski for the interim UFC heavyweight title. Early in the fight, Arlovski is outstriking Eilers on the feet. Suddenly, Eilers pops his knee and drops to the floor, with Arlovski taking full advantage and ending the fight there via TKO. His last bout with the UFC was against Brandon Vera. This is another fight that does not leave the first round, with Vera landing a nice high kick that knocks out Eilers, giving him the win via KO. After his 3 losses in a row, he was released from the UFC organization. On 25th December 2008, Eilers had an argument with his stepdad, James Malik, that ended with a fatal gunshot wound to his chest. Malik was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The last person on this list is Shane Del Rosario. Before joining the UFC, he amassed a professional MMA record of 11 wins with 0 losses. His UFC debut was against Stipe Miocic at UFC 146. Early in the fight, Shane pressures Stipe with heavy kicks to the body and head. Stipe continues to come forward and is able to connect with more punches. The round is close, with Shane landing more kicks and Stipe getting a takedown at the end of the round. In the second round, Stipe is able to get a takedown and later takes the win via TKO. His next bout was part of the Ultimate Fighter finale against Pat Barry. Shane is close to locking in a rear naked choke in round 1, but Pat manages to escape. In round 2, Pat connects with a left hand that wobbles Shane. He then comes charging forward and finishes him off, taking the win via TKO. Shane was scheduled for a couple more fights within the UFC, but had to pull out numerous times due to various injuries. On 26 November 2013, Shane was sent to the hospital after suffering a full cardiac arrest following 2 heart attacks and was put on life support with little brain activity. 4 days later, he appeared to make a slight recovery, showing signs of brain activity, such as being able to squeeze his mother's hand. He was taken off life support as he could now breathe on his own. This was short-lived as his condition took a turn for the worst and he passed away 9 days later at the age of 30. Shane is remembered as having a larger-than-life character and being the life of his family. This marks the end of the video. We're glad you stayed all the way till the end and look back on the accomplishments of these fighters inside and outside of the cage. If you liked the video, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more MMA content.